Hello and welcome to this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and as we enter fall now, we are joined by Manny DeBritto, the chair of the New Bedford Election Commission. It's that time of season again. We've completed a primary and now we've got a general election coming up in November 5th to be exact, and wow, it doesn't stop for you guys.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't
Really
stop
doesn't.
at all.
No.
Listen, the reality is, as we come to this, it's a presidential election. You, and I don't mean you specifically, but you and your counterparts all across the country, you guys are under a tremendous microscope right now. There's, already talk of election issues and whatever. So, I mean, we want to talk about, obviously, what New Bedford does, how prepared is it, and that sort of thing. And we've done this before, but I just think it's good to sort of get it out there right now.
Exactly. I mean, every system's going to have its flaws. Nothing is perfect, but we still have the best process in the world. And Massachusetts they do a good job. They do a good job with elections. Secretary of State on down, clerks, commissioners throughout the state, they're on top of their game. And we support each other, and the Secretary of State supports us. The mayor's office, the council has always supported me, and I'm grateful for that. But we are under a microscope. Everybody's watching. My thing is, I try to have an open door policy. Come in, ask questions, give me a call, ask questions. More than happy to show you the process, how mail-in works and all of that. Because I just think it's just a lack of communication and a lack of solid information out there. People are more willing to listen to outsiders than the people that actually do the election work. You and I were just talking about my staff. One's been there over 40 years, another's been there over 30 years, and they're amazing, and they really know elections. And again, come in and speak to those people.
And they're no nonsense.
They are no
I know them
nonsense.
both. I love them both, and they're no nonsense people. They are not afraid to point out issues that arise.
And they'll tell me, and like I said, even with my staff, I have an open door policy. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's figure out what works best for us. I think, one of the things that I've done since I've been there is try to kind of alleviate some of the strain. Elections have changed.
Yeah.
Even since I've been there since 2017, the mail-in and early voting and all of that additional strain on the office, and they do a great job regardless, and they just know elections. So I've been blessed to have them. I really have.
Let's talk about, first let's talk about we talked about the staff, but how are you staffing as you go into the election itself? Do you have enough poll workers? Do you have enough people participating as far as helping with the election?
Yeah, we have, our same poll workers. Many of them have done it for the same thing, 20, 30 years. And I've started a program with local high school students coming in to, be poll workers. And I think part of that is giving them that knowledge and a behind the scenes look at how elections work. We're also partnering with Fall River and Taunton. They're taking New Bedford's lead on bringing students into the fold. And again, it's more than just being a poll worker, it's educating them. I love it because a lot of those students, they translate for us. They understand technology. The poll workers absolutely adore them, and vice versa. Now we're also getting into the local colleges, BCC, UMass Dartmouth, Bridgewater State, and again, Fall River and Taunton taking our lead. I find that, New Bedford, again, is at the forefront of a lot of things, and they'll always say when they come in, or when I speak to those commissioners, wow, New Bedford is 2-3 times ahead of where we're at with a lot of things. And that means a lot to get that respect from your colleagues. It just proves how special and talented our youth is in the area, and the fact that they want to be civically engaged. And again, just learn about the process, not about who to vote for. It's not a partisan thing. It's just getting them involved, sparking conversations with their parents, their peers at school, stuff like that. I think it's important.
Polls open at 7.
Yes.
So you'll have the staffing will be right there right off the bat.
Yes.
And obviously you can't be every place at the same time. You're relying, each precinct, as I'm familiar, has a chair or whatever you want to call it, warden, and so they are responsible for that particular precinct.
Yes, so they're in charge of that precinct. They answer to me. Obviously, the wardens, they show up at 6 a.m. and we deliver the voting machines and ballots. All of that comes on election morning. The police officers show up also.
And you'll have police officers at every precinct.
They have to be there. They're the keeper of the keys. So they hold the keys for the ballots, the voting machine. So you have an officer at every single location. By law, we have to. We have a clerk at every single location. They take notes. They notate everything, the amount of ballots they receive, how many ballots get processed. They're in charge of all of that.
How do you know how many ballots go to each precinct? Because this is a state election too. This isn't a municipal one. This is a state election.
Yes.
How do you know that, and I'm just using this as an example, precinct 3, Ward 3, precinct 2, whatever, how do you know that they get the specific amount of ballots that they need and that they're not short?
So I have a count of all the precincts. New Bedford has 41 precincts at over 28 locations. So we're a big operation. We're one of the biggest cities. We have more registered voters than a lot of other places in the state. So what I'll do is I'll have a spreadsheet. I know how many registered voters are in each location. I set up how many ballots we should be sending to each precinct, and we sign off on this is how many ballots we've given. Primary's a little bit more challenging because you pick a party, Democrat, Republican, then you have all of these unenrolled voters that you don't know what they're gonna select. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. I think my staff does a good job at times when I'm unable to do those things. We audit. I'll go through and I'll check certain bags, make sure. But again, if everything goes smoothly, the warden shows up at 6 a.m., the police officer shows up at 6 a.m. If there is an issue, there should be enough time to give us a heads up and make sure we have, say, the right number of ballots or the machine is up and running, all of those things. There should be enough time to do that before 7 a.m. so we open on time.
Talking about the machines, the city buys the machines.
Yes.
But, you don't maintain them. They're from a company that I know that has to, I assume, every year they're going over it like a fine-tooth comb.
So we have a company, it's called ES&S. They come in and they service the machines. Every year they have to. Again, it's under contract. And then prior to every election, we test each machine that's going to go out there, make sure the ballots run through all of them. So, it is a process. So they get serviced once a year, and also they test for the ballots, make sure they read the ballots. One thing that's happened in the past, you have that service and the testing, and, it's just a short 10, 15-minute thing. When the machines go out to the polls on election day, they're plugged in all day. And, sometimes the battery might, dry down quicker than normal because these machines are pretty old, since 2015. So we've had some problems with that, but what we've done is take some of the older machines that have been an issue for us and brought in new machines, again, to make sure that those breakdowns don't happen. But again, there are things in place for election day. Yeah, there's stuff there that, again, I have runners that go to every single location and they're trained on the machines and they're there to help on election day.
I was going to say you have tech people that are available.
Yes.
Talk about the machines, and I know we've done this in the past, but I want you to talk about it again. When people say, oh, I don't trust the machines.
Yeah. The machines are so accurate. Like I've probably had about 5 or 6 recounts.
But you can't manipulate them.
No. So, they're programmed a certain way and they're programmed to read that election. And we've done recounts and they've been so spot on that, again, people that claim there's issues with the machines, again, there's a process and procedures that come from the state on how you handle certain things. A lot of times the ballots are so long now, and you'll see with all the questions, this ballot is like 19 inches long. The machine's gonna jam. That doesn't mean that it's broken. It's almost like a copy machine that you would have in the office. But again,
well, it looks like you feed it like a regular copy machine. Yeah.
It's a scanner on top of a garbage bin that's just secured. That's literally what it is. If there is a jam, we don't stop anyone or pause voting. they'll hand it to the warding, and then there's actually an auxiliary bin that's locked. They slide that in, and then at the end of the night, they count the ballots and they tally them. So it's one of those things.
You do hear a lot of people say we want to go back to the old day where it's hand counted, and
there's so much more room for error doing hand count. Again, you're trusting people, and there's going to be more mistakes. What Massachusetts has in place is not only do you have the tabulator, but you also have the physical ballots. So if we need to go back and count them, we have them. You know what I mean? So we're a paper ballot system. And what people don't understand is all the numbers have to tie off, from the number of names crossed off on the voter list to the number of ballots that we receive as cast, the numbers we get back as uncast. We have overseas. All of that stuff is accounted for. And I can't certify an election if the numbers don't match up. So, you know, it just would be so difficult to do that on a large scale across how many cities and towns across the country, how many states. I think, and again, Massachusetts has such a great system. Is it perfect? Of course not. Nothing is.
Talk about the mail-in ballots and the absentee ballots. What's the difference between them?
Okay.
And again, talk about how secure are they? Because
Yeah.
I know people question those. They're like, oh, they're just dumping in these ballots that came out from somewhere, and they...
So the absentee is just, you know, you have a medical reason why you can't vote, and, you know, on election day. So we might have people that automatically are on this absentee list, and we have doctor's note and all that.
Do you need a doctor's note?
To be on a permanent absentee list?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have that in the system, so those people automatically get their ballots. And then the mail-in system started really around COVID.
Correct.
Where you
And you talked about that a lot. One of the
it's a no excuse kind of, you know, process where anyone can request a mail-in ballot. And, you know, I often tell people it's more secure mail-in and absentee than actually going to election day. And because there are so many steps to processing a mail-in or absentee. So, you know, when the state sends out the applications, vote by mail, we get those back, we scan it into the system.
Correct, it comes from the state.
Yes, comes from the state.
It's a little card.
Exactly.
We got that in the mail.
Not from me. During municipal elections, yes, it does come from the city. A lot of cities and towns might not even do mail-in for their local elections, but we do in New Bedford because we want to give people an opportunity to vote. So when we mail out a ballot, we have to scan into the system again. When we get a ballot back, we scan it in the system again. Then we do advanced processing. It's getting crossed off the voter list, so there's another step. And then after the election, we scan everybody's voter ID, the fact that they voted, and that's input. So there's 5 steps to mail-in, and in-person early voting goes through a similar process. Absentee, similar process. So all of this stuff happens with your mail-in ballot. While I can't control the post office, that's the only thing. Right. We have drop-off boxes. People can walk into the election office and drop off their ballots. If they're, you know, more secure. If people mail in the ballots, give me a call a week or 2 later to make sure we receive them. You can actually even track it online. So it is really, really secure. And again, Massachusetts has a great system. It's added a lot of work on our end. But again, I'm in favor of the mail-in because it gives people opportunity to vote. There's really, like I said, no excuse. You know, if you're not going to be around on election day, you can come in and vote early. We're there on weekends. You can send them in a mail-in ballot. There's so many options for the residents of New Bedford. So, you know, you have to be a citizen. You got to be 18. Those things, but that part of it hasn't changed.
I was just going to say, talk about, because you touched on that. Talk about the fact who is voting. I mean, because you tell me you're getting calls about there are people who aren't registered to vote who are there are hundreds casting their ballots. How do you ensure that there are registered voters, eligible registered voters, taking part in the election?
Yeah. So, I mean, what happens is, you know, people are signing under the penalty of perjury that they are a citizen, that they are 18, and that they are a resident of the city of New Bedford and they have an address. None of that has changed, even with people that are undocumented getting licenses. Just having a license doesn't necessarily mean you're registered to vote. Like, one has nothing to do with the other. you are getting registered to vote at the registry. Again, if you're a citizen, you're 18, they changed the law a couple of years back where people now that go through any state agency are automatically registered to vote. But again, those criteria are still there. So,
But how do we know? And I think that's the thing. Joe Smith walks in, or Joanne Smith walks in. Yeah, I'm here. They put a fake address and fake signature and blank blank. So
I mean, we have everyone's signature. That's something that we capture. We have now, the state has added license numbers as a distinguisher, right? So there's no duplicates and no fakes. Last four, someone's social, their birth date, their whole name, and the state on the back end for the voter registry, they're tracking all of that stuff. They investigate that stuff. You might be requested to show an ID on election day when the state, if you're missing some of that information.
If you're flagged, you
could be flagged if they don't have that. So now you got to prove you are who you say you are. Mail-ins, we match off the signature to see, if you are who you say you are.
And people wonder if you actually do that.
Yes, and I mean, it's a lot, like I said, it's a lot more work, but there are systems in place. And I tell people, is it gonna be perfect? Of course not. But you can't assume that everyone that's registering to vote, everyone that's there, is lying to you. It's just like anyone going into a store. You're not gonna assume everyone going into that store is gonna rob the store. Those are one of the things. So our job is the people that are registered to process their votes. The state is the people that research and look at this individual's background. If someone hasn't voted in years, so some people might not have voted since 2020 because they only vote for presidential. They might have been made an inactive voter. All of that means is you're still on the voter list, but now you got to sign a affidavit. I am who I say I am. You got to show some kind of proof of address, and then you can vote that day. So just because someone's inactive doesn't mean they're removed from the voter list. And again, there's so much stuff that happens behind the scenes where they're, confirming this information. And then I also go back to what's in it for someone that say is undocumented to vote. What do they get out of that? Same thing with, the accusations of rigging an election. What is there to gain? Our job is to count them. I only get one vote. I really don't care who people vote for it, as long as they vote. And we count them. And like I said, we have the physical ballots. If there's ever a question, presidential election, the state also picks communities to do audits. And you have to hand count those ballots to make sure the numbers are right. So again, there's so many things to confirm the data.
And you've got other folks that say that you've got deceased people voting.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know how that would work, but I guess you go in, I guess theoretically you're voting twice. You go in as one person and then you go in again and say you're another person.
I mean, the thing is, we scrub that list every day. So we get a death notice from the state and we go through and those people are removed. My staff also looks through local obituaries and, we might get notified by a family. So we look at that every single day. Those numbers change every single day and we're on it. One of the things that makes it a little bit difficult is if someone were to pass away in another state, let's say. So we don't get that information right away. It might be a lag or delay. Though, again, those things might happen, but we're scrubbing. And again, my staff has been there 30, 40 years, so they're right on top of things. Like I said, they're researching every single day who should be on the list and who shouldn't be on the list.
The other X factor that I always, and I've said this before to you, the X factor to me is when you're looking, when you're going to the poll, most of the poll workers are in the same precinct I know my poll workers.
Yes.
So they know who I am, they know who my neighbors are. And they'll give me, and it's funny because they'll say, Jim, so-and-so hasn't come down yet. You knock on their door, make sure they come. And it's funny but they know who you are and they know who is voting.
Exactly.
So I'm not saying somebody wouldn't try, but I think in a large part, they know who Jim Marshall is, and if somebody comes in pretending to be Jim Marshall and it's not him, they know it's not me.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get ratted out to my wife all the time. Manny hasn't voted yet. Manny hasn't had a chance. I mean, I obviously really busy that day, but they'll tell my wife, Manny hasn't been here yet. You better make sure he gets his vote in. So, like you said, they know the folks. They know everyone.
And I think that's part of what you do. You keep the same people there because then they do get to know the voters.
Yeah, I mean, and we do. And the majority of people have been there for quite some time, and they do an amazing job. And they're sacrificing for the city. You know, they care. It's like a social event for them. They look forward to it. They'll get their hair done. I'll come in and they're all looking good and they're ready to go for that day because that's something that, you know, excites them. They like to be amongst the public. And even that is getting more difficult.
And it was very much a team too. I mean, and I know because I've told you before, my mother was a poll worker in Wareham for years. Mm-hmm. And it was a tight-knit group where she voted.
Yes.
And again, they knew people.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be new people coming in, but for the most part, the majority of people, they already know.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because sometimes I'll get these little notes and it'll say, well, this person doesn't live at this address or this person has passed away or whatever. And they might see a name on the voter list, but what they don't see is the I next to their name that says ask for an ID because they're an inactive voter. So just because a name's there doesn't mean necessarily that they're able to vote. Or, you know, it's mistakenly still on it. What happens is after a couple of elections, you become an inactive voter.
Yeah.
If you still don't vote, you'll get removed from the voter list. So again, there are things in place, and I can always go in and track if someone gives me that information. Has this individual been voting, or is it someone fraudulently using their vote? It's a really great system. So. And
it's funny for me because my son used to go with me to vote too, and now he is voting. Mm-hmm. So they remember him as this little guy, and now he's participating. Yeah. And my daughter's like that too. And it's funny when they see the kids growing up doing it.
Exactly, and that's one of the things too, like one of the programs, I go into the elementary schools. We have this talk about how important voting is, and again, not who to vote for, but the fact that you should go home and talk to your parents. Talk to your parents about the process. You know, being a child of immigrants, I know I taught my parents a lot of things, you know, when I was a youth coming up. So these kids have an opportunity to go home and talk to their parents about this stuff. Mom, Dad, why do you vote? Why don't you vote? Hey, you represent me, Mom and Dad, and these things are important. I think you should go vote. And hopefully that starts like a trend of them being invested at an early age and more likely to vote when they become 18. And again, voting for what they think is right. Based on these conversations with their parents, because it's life experience, it's perspective. Everybody has a different upbringing and different circumstances. So again, just starting those conversations at home. Like you said, you bring your kids. A lot of parents aren't doing that anymore because they're not voting.
Yeah.
So when do these kids get exposed to, you know, the right to vote and why you should vote, and we need you to vote, especially in a city like New Bedford, which is a gateway city. We need voter turnout to increase, you know, for the benefit of everybody in the city. And again, not so much who you're voting for, but the fact that you are voting and you're engaged civically and you're part of something. You're part of, you know, I always tell the kids, like, you are the future. It's your vision of the future that really matters for the area, you know. We're old, Jim.
About that. Listen, I'm not there yet.
You don't want to admit that, but again, they're going to be able to impact, you know, the world through their vote much sooner than any other generation, because older folks, we're not voting.
Yeah.
From 30 to 60 years old.
You've got some key dates coming up. Why don't you run through those dates for people to know right now? Okay. We're recording this show in late September, so we've got the month of October, but you've got some dates.
Yeah, so early voting in person at the library. We do it every year at the Buttonwood Library, 3rd floor. It's a beautiful space. People can come in and vote early.
At the main library.
At the main library.
Not the Buttonwood Library.
Not the Buttonwood, main library. You can come in and vote starting October 19th, and that runs every day from the 19th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. all the way through to November 1st at the library. So the weekend before the actual election itself. So people are able to come in, and again, if you can't make it on election day, you can still vote in person at the main library and just do that. And again, that's 2 whole weeks.
Mail-in balloting and absentee balloting, you've already had to have that in right now?
No. So we can receive your applications up until, I believe it's the 26th. And if we get a mail-in ballot application, we have to mail it out, and then you have to return it some way, but we have to mail it out. But we accept ballots back up until 8 p.m. on election night,
Postmarked.
and then up to 3 days after the election, as long as they're postmarked by the election day, by November 5th, there's still a post-tabulation period because people are sending these things from all over the place. And again, you have thousands of these mail-in ballots now. So
can you still register to vote right now?
you can still register to vote up until 10 days prior to the election. And again, I think that's October 26th, if I'm correct.
And if
until 5 p.m.
if you go in to register to vote, what do you need?
You need your name, like I said, either your last four of your social, you need your address, birth date, license number. And you can do that online. You can come into the office and do that.
What if you don't have a license?
So
because there are,
yeah,
especially elderly people don't have the license.
You don't necessarily have to have a license to vote. Again, that's not a prerequisite. So you don't have to. We just need that information. So instead of a license number, we'd get your social, your birth date, your address, all of those others, your full middle name now instead of middle initial. They're looking for the full middle name, again, just to distinguish folks so that there aren't duplicates out there.
So I always ask this every year, what do you think turnout for this year will be? We've got a couple of contested state races too, state rep races.
Yes, so I mean, I'm not one for predictions. Last 2020, I believe, was 56% for New Bedford. But again, that was a special circumstance with COVID. Who knows how that impacted things. I'm thinking over 60%.
That'd be great.
This time. And again, I think that's still low.
Yeah.
People need to be more interested. I'd love for municipal elections to be up at 60%. That actually affects us, taxes and who's representing us in the city. Will that ever occur? I have no idea. But again, trying to set up good habits for the youth as they get older, hopefully that improves turnout over the years.
And how do you think as far as the results go? When will you have the tabulations? When will you be able to announce preliminary? Because I know there's nothing official, but preliminary.
Yes. So, I mean, like I said, New Bedford has 41 precincts spread out over 28 locations. And the process, it's not a race. I'm not trying to beat any other city or town with my results. So I want it done correctly and accurately. I don't feel like pressuring the poll workers because you're in a rush. I think more accidents happen and more mistakes would happen that way. So, I mean, in an election like this, you're thinking at least 10 at the earliest because, again, they're going through a ton of ballots.
Right.
They're making sure the numbers tie off. Once we get them at the end of the night, I have to process the flash drives, the turnouts. It takes time.
Right.
It takes time.
No,
so,
true.
yeah.
If people have questions, concerns, issues, how do they get in touch with you folks? They may not talk to you, but you've got a good staff there too.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that has any questions regarding their registration status, where their polling location is, now's the time to find out. Call the election office. We're there to help. 508-979-1420. You can email elections@newbedford, all spelled out, -ma.gov. You can shoot me an email. Again, you can go online on the Secretary of State's website, which we have links on the Election Commission page, and you can check for yourself online. There's so many different ways to do so. And again, people that haven't voted since 2020, something might have changed. Make sure you call in. You might be an inactive voter now, so now you're going to need a proof of address. You can come in and actually re-register and update so you're not an inactive voter anymore. But now's the time to find out before Election Day so you're not running around.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Manny DeBritto, our guest. That's going to do it for this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.